Hello, I have owned an Xbox Series X since launch day, but I am considering selling it because I believe that third-party gaming studios are going to stop making games for the Xbox because Microsoft are going to exit the hardware market, or alternatively, they are going to make an Xbox that is essentially a PC. And in this video, I'm going to speak about this in detail. In the past, roughly in the 90s or noughties, the formula for gaming was easy. Make the most powerful console and produce a couple of AAA titles for the console, and you'll have people flocking to buy their console just to play those games. However, today, the most popular games are live service games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, and Minecraft. And some people spend 70% of the time just playing those games. And you can play those games on several different platforms, whether it's PS5, Series X, or even PlayStation 4, or a much, much older PC. So you don't even need to buy the absolute latest gaming consoles or PCs to play those games. And also, most importantly, a lot of gaming now, I think 60% of it takes place on mobile devices. And a great example is Monopoly Go. It launched in 2023, and in 10 months, their game generated $2 billion. And that makes a complete mockery out of AAA titles like Starfield and Halo and Forza. It is quite clear that mobile games are more profitable than console games. And it's quite obvious. Like if you take the Series X and Series S, I think around 20 million examples have sold. And for PlayStation 5, I believe it's around 50 million. But Monopoly Go, it targets smartphones, and there's probably around 1 billion smartphones out there that can play Monopoly Go. So the size of the audience is bafflingly big, really, really big. And that really puts into question then, is it really worth spending 150 to $300 million producing a AAA title over 5 years when the return investment is going to be significantly less compared with a mobile phone game that only takes a couple of months to develop and launch? Because the cost of producing games have spiraled, and it's not going to go down. It's only going to go up. And they have gone up for several reasons. First of all, games are getting bigger. We crave open world games that are big, diverse, and dense. And the bigger the game is, the longer and more resource intensive it is to develop. And with some AAA titles, you're not just launching one game, but you're kind of almost launching two games. You have the single player version, and then you also have the multiplayer version. So it's effectively two different games. And you need to develop, you need to invest in the R&D for both those games. And then you also need to set aside a budget for maintaining and servicing those games post-launch. And that costs money, especially if you're doing it across multiple platforms as well. And that's a huge factor. And that's probably one of the reasons why in the past 6 to 12 months, we've seen numerous gaming studios reducing their head count and canceling a lot of games because they've seen that actually the costs have spiraled out of control. And it's time to kind of rethink like, okay, what type of games do we want to make? What type of games do people actually want to pay for and play? And what type of games have the lowest risk versus reward ratio? So that is a huge factor. And if you're a company like Microsoft and you're making a gaming console, you have to make AAA titles. You have to make big titles to almost take full advantage of the power that these consoles have. Because otherwise, if you don't have any showcase games, who's going to want to upgrade to your console? It's not going to be that many people who want to do it. So you either need to produce those games in-house, or you need to fund third-party studios to develop them. and that costs money. And it's also kind of a shift that we're going to see now, where studios start to develop a little bit more of like indie games that are a little bit smaller, and we've seen Microsoft hinting at that as well, especially since one of their recent games, Hi-Fi Rush, has been quite critically acclaimed, and they're now asking themselves, hey, maybe we should start making smaller games. And again, if you're making smaller games that can run on hardware that's 5 years old, or even PCs that are 8 years old, then there's a lack of justification to invest a couple of $1 billion into developing a new cutting edge console. And also, speaking about hardware for consoles, we're not just talking hardware these days, but software is an equally resource intensive component now as well. And by software, I mean AI. AI is huge, huge focus right now. And when it comes to AI, you need software engineers to design the algorithms for upscaling and frame generation. And you also need to develop the toolkit that gaming studios can use to utilize those upscaling techniques. So that's another component, and that component adds to the development time and cost as well, because everything needs to be tested, developed, optimized, Q&A, and you need feedback on it. So the more complexity you add, the more the costs go up, almost exponentially as well, especially if the game is a bit of a shanty town in the way that it's coded, where if you fix a bug somewhere, that then breaks something else in the game elsewhere, and you fix that part and it turns into this like whack-a-mole game as well. So that's another factor. And if Microsoft were to develop a new console, they would want to work with the best. And that's not AMD, that's Nvidia. And Nvidia are really busy right now. They recently announced that their Q1 revenue was $26 billion. We have Meta, Microsoft, and Google placing huge orders for Nvidia's AI chips. Like, they are paying several billions upfront to secure supply of those chips. So therefore, if you want to work with Nvidia right now on a custom project, they're going to charge you a lot of money, because time is finite, especially for the CEO, Jensen, but time is also finite for Satya, Microsoft CEOs. And I recently watched the Microsoft Build conference, and you can see that they are fully invested into AI. AI is a religion for Microsoft right now. That's a huge priority. So therefore, investing money into a new console will be a huge distraction if the ROI for spending $2 billion on AI is greater than investing $2 billion on a new Xbox console. And this probably explains why Microsoft have been a bit a bit quiet on the future of Xbox. They haven't really made any announcements, except that Xbox exclusives are going to come to other platforms like PlayStation, potentially Nintendo, or even smartphones as well. It's quite clear that things are up in the air with regards to what the future of Xbox is. And that makes gaming studios nervous, because again, they do not want to invest money into developing games for a platform where the size of the audience is going to decrease in proportion to the size of the audience for PS5 or even Nintendo. So it's quite a nervous time for Xbox fans, because especially if you've had an Xbox console for the past like 10 or 15 years, it's been kind of part of your life. But it looks to be like things could change quite a lot. And another thing that's worth talking about is that platforms are merging. In the past, we used to talk about playing on console, PC, or handhelds. And these platforms had like different capabilities with regards to graphical fidelity. but they are all getting a lot closer. And one of the first steps was the Nintendo Switch. That meant that Nintendo had a handheld and a living room console all in one. And that's been fantastic because they've been able to cover two different segments at once. So, which is why the Switch is really well liked. It's like two in one. And then we also have smartphones, and we've seen that Assassin's Creed is just one of several console or PC titles that have been announced for the iPhone 15 Pro and also the 16 Pro, which is quite interesting. And I think in about 2 years, the graphics on an iPhone will probably be comparable to an Xbox Series S. Sure, it's not going to be 4K resolution like having a Series X or a PC with like a 4090, but for the vast majority of consumers, that will be good enough. A lot of them are happy with 30 or 60 frames per second, and even resolution that's lower than 4K or upscaled to 4K. And if smartphones develop graphics that are comparable to a Series S or PS4 Pro, then that's really interesting for gaming studios, because then you can say, hey, I'm just going to make games for phones instead of consoles, because phones sell in units of hundreds of millions. Meanwhile, gaming consoles, over the span of one life cycle for like a PS4 or an Xbox One, you may be looking at something between 50 to 120 million units. But for a smartphone that sells in 100 millions of units, and then the next year you have the successor as well, and you have more units in circulation. So smartphones are really the joker, because if you're thinking, oh, this console war is all about Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony, it's not. Smartphones are actually the biggest threat. And that's one of the reasons why even Nintendo caved in and launched games for smartphones. In the beginning, they were like, no, you should just play games on our handhelds, etc. We don't believe that gaming should take place on smartphones, etc. They did not say exactly that, but that was like the position of many like hardware manufacturers or games developers as well, who were a bit like anti-smartphones. But then they now have games that are available on Android and also iOS that you play with your thumb, which was really inconceivable like 10 or so years ago. So to kind of recap that, AAA titles are too expensive, they're too risky, and can potentially flop. A lot of users play live service games, and gaming on mobile devices is profitable, and it's only getting bigger. And there's a greater ROI from investing money into AI than it is to invest money into a new console for the Xbox ecosystem. But if Microsoft stay in the hardware segment, I think they could produce an Xbox that's like a PC. And this would make sense, because if you look at Game Pass now, if you subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate, you have access to games on the PC, and Xbox, you also have cross-platform saving as well. And actually, for a lot of games, the graphics look similar. Like Fortnite, Call of Duty, all of these games look very comparable on console as they do on PC. Like, those games are designed for the lowest common denominator, so they really run similar on a lot of platforms. And PCs are also getting more efficient thanks to AI, because now, like, some might say that if you want to play in 4K, you need to buy a 4080 or 4090, but that's not true. My previous graphics card was a 4070, and with DLSS and frame generation, it could achieve 4K at 60 frames per second in the majority of games. And that was good. And bear in mind that a lot of TVs that people have a limit of 60 frames per second, not 120. So actually the 4070 with the upscaling is a bit of a 4K graphics card. And I believe that next year and the year after, something like an RTX 5060 or 6060 will have comparable or even better performance than a 4070. And today there's actually 4060 cards that only have a single fan. They're quite compact. And if you have single fan 5060 or 6060, then that's something that's small that could fit in an ITX enclosure that's really compact. That will be comparable in size to a Series X or PS5. And that could be really interesting because you could then potentially have like an Xbox PC that runs Windows, but Windows that could start in a big picture mode where you don't need to even see the Windows interface, and you launch straight into a gaming environment, a little bit like how you would do on the Xbox or on the Steam Deck. So that can be really interesting. And if Microsoft produces a reference Xbox PC, this could be done using off-shelf parts, using off-shelf GPUs and RAMs, etc. So it wouldn't really cost them billions in R&D. They will need to be spent over several years. But they could even work with OEM component manufacturers like MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, and they can develop smaller form factor motherboards, GPUs, and other components that can fit in a really, really tiny case. And that reference Xbox PC would be a little bit like the Steam Deck or the Google Pixel phone, where you have the large corporation developing hardware to show everyone this is what could be built and this is what success look like. And then everyone can then go off and develop something similar that will also meet consumer expectations. So that's what I believe Microsoft could do. Either an Xbox PC as a reference design, or they could even consider an handheld like the Steam Deck. Because consoles as we know them, like developing them over 5 or 7 years and then investing like $300 million into AAA titles that have a high risk of flopping, it's not a business model that works anymore, especially since attention is now a zero-sum game. Gaming on an Xbox, you are basically, Xbox games are competing with YouTube, Temu, TikTok shopping, streaming, and live TV, live sports on TV. Like, gaming competes with all of those things. So it's no longer about Xbox against Nintendo or Sony, but we all compete for the same eyeballs. Like, as a user, there's only a limited amount of time that I have in a day to put my eyes in front of a screen. So competition has really changed quite a lot. And then you even have games like Roblox, where you have games within Roblox as well, which is really baffling. Because it started off as this kind of virtual world where you can spend time, but now you have third-party developers launching games within Roblox, which is fascinating. So the whole ecosystem of gaming has changed, and you also have this big movement towards freemium games that are free to play, but then are then heavily monetized with in-app purchases or even ads. So that is my waffle. Like, I genuinely believe that Microsoft are going to exit the hardware segment as we know it. And I don't really know what to do with my Series X, because I purchased the PC in December last year, and I'm just going to buy games for it going forward, because all the games run better on my PC than they do on the Xbox. But I need to keep the Xbox because GTA 6 will be coming out next year, hopefully. and it will launch on consoles first. And sure, I can say, yeah, let me sell the Xbox and then just wait for GTA 6 on PC, but I don't think I'm going to be able to wait that long because that game will be everywhere. Spoilers will be everywhere I look, so I will just have to play it on launch day. But then it feels a bit sad to have an Xbox sitting in the lounge for probably another 18 to 24 months just waiting for GTA 6. And of course, once GTA 6 has arrived, then I will likely just sell the Xbox, because if I want to play other games on it, then I might be better off selling it and just buying the Switch 2, which the kids will also be able to play. So that's it for my speculation. Feel free to join in the comments. Thank you.